I obsessed over becoming a millionaire. This is what I learned. Crazy title.
88% of millionaires have one thing in common. They own a business. When I found that out, my life totally changed. At age 11, I started cleaning office buildings when my family started a commercial cleaning company. So 3 to 5 nights a week from the age of 11 to like 17, I was cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash, vacuuming almost every single night. But it made it very clear to me that I didn't want to have a job that I don't enjoy doing for the rest of my life, which seemed to be what almost every adult that I knew was doing. So since that time, I have poured well over 10,000 hours into reading almost 100 books on personal finance, listening to hundreds of podcasts, hundreds of YouTube videos, articles. I really obsessed about learning everything I could about becoming a millionaire at an early age. And while I found out that it's actually relatively easy to become a millionaire in 40 years by the time you're 60, it's actually very possible to do it in your 20s and 30s if you're just willing to be a little different. But if you want to do it fast, you need to take control and do it for yourself. In this video, I wanted to share 3 proven paths to building wealth and becoming a millionaire: the slow and steady approach, the fast track approach, and the young millionaire. And I know that this works because I followed a lot of these things and I was able to leave my day job at 24 and actually have financial freedom by the time I was 27, using these exact same steps that honestly I just stole from other people who were very successful. So now it's your turn. According to Fidelity, 88% of millionaires are self-made. In fact, only about 12% actually became millionaires through being high paid, like your doctor or lawyer, things like that. And this really showed me a little bit of what my path should be. So I want to break down each of these paths to becoming a millionaire, how they work, and why I chose the one that I chose. The first one is the slow path. It is get rich eventually. And honestly, it does work. This is the conventional, go to college, get a good job, try to save, X% of your income, put it in a 401k and a Roth IRA, let it compound over decades, and eventually when you're 60 or 65, you will be a millionaire. The common rule with this is that if you invest $500 a month, you get an 8% return over the course of 35 years, you will have $1 million.
Nobody wants to do that, though.
That you'll also be 60. And therefore for me, this is just not an option. I just kind of write it off, ignore it, pretend it doesn't exist. Because personally, I'm not willing to take that risk that it'll take 35 years to get to where I want to go. I'd rather take the risk of being a little more extreme. So before we get to the extreme one, let's talk about the medium path. And this is to accelerate that process through side hustles and investments. And I actually think that this medium approach is a very solid path for a lot of people. It is kind of more or less what I started on, where I knew that my earning potential, since I didn't graduate high school or go to college, was limited. And even if I had gone to those, I would have had debt or had to pay for them. So the math would have kind of equaled out. But regardless, I knew that there was only so much I could earn with the skills that I had. And for me, the goal was that one of these would eventually click and I wouldn't have to take too much of a risk because I could lower my expenses enough, rise up enough of these income streams from different side hustles that it could eventually replace my day job without there being too much risk. In my example, the one that ended up sticking was content creation. And while it lost money for the first 3 years, I gained a lot of valuable skills and knowledge during that time. And eventually it built up enough that it could replace mine and my wife's income. And we were both able to leave our jobs. But before that,
if you're unaware, by the way, content creation, it takes a long time, especially on YouTube. It takes a long time. It can take a lot of resources. And to be honest with you, a ton of people give up, but it's definitely worth it at the end. So
we lived on less than half of my main income and funneled everything else into buying investments and assets that pay me money every single month. And this is one of the common things that I realized that most millionaires did, is that they owned some type of real estate. In fact, 90% of millionaires own real estate. And it's often said that real estate is a key wealth builder. And by reinvesting some rental profits back into more real estate and kind of snowballing that, you could reach $1 million net worth in roughly 10 to 15 years instead of 40 years. And actually just by doing 2 of those, I am on track to have those 2 properties alone become worth $1 million to me in that 10 to 15 year timeline. But I know not everybody wants to own real estate. So another medium path is to try to earn more money at your day job. This is something that not everybody can do, but there are a lot of people who are able to really hone down, and instead of spending time starting a side business, they spend that time becoming more valuable at their main job, live on a very low percentage of that, and then by the time you're 30, you might be in your peak earning years. This is one that Scott Trent.
But hold on, this is the one that is super risky, because let's just keep it simple. What if you get fired? which can happen. You can't say, oh, that's not good. No, what if you get fired? Then you restart again, you lose everything. You see what I mean? So it's very dangerous. It doesn't seem risky,
and then by the
but
time
it's
you're
risky.
30, you might be in your peak earning years. This is one that Scott Trench actually talks about in the book Set for Life, where it's important to either have a scalable job, which would be probably like something in sales, where if you work really hard and you do really well at your job, you can make a lot of money. If you do terrible, you make no money. So you kind of take on that risk for yourself, which is that same idea of owning a business where you're really betting on yourself instead of taking something safe and in between. But then he also talks about in the book the idea of starting a side hustle that can also make you money as you're going. Because like he says, at some point you have to increase your earning. You can't cut your expenses anymore. So by boosting your income, working on side hustles, doing some investing, you can drastically change that 35 or 40 years down to 10 to 20 years with a very reasonable chance of success that if you continue that high savings rate, earning more money, building multiple streams of income, taking the money that you're saving and not just putting it in the bank account, but actually investing it into something. And while it might be slightly slower than the fast lane, it's way, way better than the slow lane. Before we get into the Millionaire Fast Lane, which I am personally in, I want to let you know about a really cool tool to manage your finances all in one spot. And that is the sponsor of today's video, Monarch Money. Knowing where your money is going is...
Now he's about to talk about the Millionaire Fast Lane. If you haven't read this book, I highly recommend it. In fact, I might even reread it.
Strategy. This is to start your own business that can scale. Now, why this is called the fast lane is because there is literally no cap on how much you can earn with a business. Now, again, you can also earn nothing or even lose money in a business. But that's one of the reasons why it works. If you take no responsibility, you deserve no reward and you will get no reward. And when you start having a business, you stop this one-to-one trade of time for money, which I was trapped in for years, and you start building an asset which will continually pay you money for a very long time. This is how almost every young millionaire is made who make it in their 20s or 30. They are providing value to people at scale and in return getting rewarded for that. The key lesson from this book says that wealth comes from solving problems at scale. That's generally all it is, and it just depends on how long it takes you to get there. So find a problem.
It's crazy how simple it is, isn't it? Wealth comes from solving problems at scale. The bigger the problem you solve, the more you get paid, essentially. Powerful,
that you can
right?
solve or a skill that you can monetize, but you want to find something that can reach a lot of people and has the ability to scale. If you start a business and it doesn't have the opportunity to get to $1 million, then you're just going to waste your time because there's a limit on how much you can make. So you want to make sure you get something that has infinite upside or at least very high upside. For me, I realized that there was a hole in the market of people talking about how to leave their job in their 20s, especially when I started this channel. And so that's what I went to serve. I had no expectations of actually making money, but I wanted to share something that I was passionate about and something that I knew was proven to work. All these books I was reading, all these things I was doing that were actually working. I realized it solved a big problem for me, and more people want to have freedom and leave their 9-to-5s. And so
I'll tell you, the key nugget is become the expert in the field that you want to serve. So that when people look at that field, they're like, oh yeah, that's the guy that you want to be at the forefront. Because one thing I've noticed reading all of these books about wealth and stuff like that, there's always room for the best. As long as you become the best in your industry at something, oh my days, there will always, yes you, my friend, you. There will always be room for you. The only person who's holding themselves back is yourself. Look in the mirror, the man in the mirror.
So over the course of 6 years, I was able to build this YouTube channel, which has generated almost $500,000 in AdSense alone. And at this point, because I put in tens of thousands of hours into this business, learning about it, failing, losing money for years, where it earns more now in 4 hours a week than I ever possibly could working a 9-to-5. But it could have also just as easily failed like the dozen other side hustles that I tried and failed and learned from and tried again and failed and learned from. And if you do that enough times and genuinely grow and genuinely give it your best, it's probably gonna work. Most people just quit almost immediately and they never have a chance. Another option would be to actually buy a business instead of creating your own. This is where you can skip all the setup phase, all the learning and failing stages. And you can do this from anything from an online e-commerce website or platform to a local service company. I'm actually looking at buying a local company right now. And this is something that I've just learned about more recently, that I could have done this years ago as well. And that this is an option for a lot of people, is to buy a small business that is established, it generates consistent cash flow, and can be much, much cheaper to get into than it would be to buy maybe an online company that has the same income. And the cool thing is, if you get somebody who is closer to retirement, which a lot of people who owned a small business, they get to the point of retirement, they want to sell it. A lot of times they can finance the business themselves. So you kind of learn to run the business, run it for a couple of years, and after 4 or 5 years of them keeping the profits, you own this business and then you start to keep all the profits. And
a kitchen design company, that's what one of my friends recently purchased, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And they struggled. They purchased it from a guy who used to run it. He became old, and to be honest with you, he couldn't be bothered with the headache, the setup and stuff like that. So he sold it to them for about 53 grand. They purchased it and they had to learn from the ground up who to contact, the manufacturers, what to do, how to actually install these kitchens once you design it. So there was a ton of risk, and they were operating basically at zero profit. The margins were thin because you're just brand new. You don't know how you acquire new customers, because the thing about kitchens is once you sell it, you need to keep finding new clients, because it's not a repeatable business. Essentially, it is, but it's very, very long term. You know, to get a kitchen replaced, it might take like, I don't know, 20 years plus, 15, depends on how well it's maintained. So they decided to switch things around, and eventually the business took up. You know, it took off, and now they're making a killing. So don't be afraid. Challenge, go against the grain. And I'm telling you right now, things can definitely pay off. Let me see the top comment in the comment section. Okay, because this video just launched. I became a millionaire around 2015 and I own a business. Actually 3. So yes, it's a thing. Find a widget that people want, observe, and bind your time. Then pull the trigger. That's perfect right there. Let me know your thoughts. Would you buy a business? Would you start your own? Go finish the rest of the video on this channel, and you, my friend, I'll catch you on the next one. Like the video as well. God bless you so much.